I used to think regret would arrive loudly. I imagined it as something dramatic, something that would crash into my life like a storm and force me to stop. I was wrong. Regret is quiet. It waits patiently. It lets you live an entire life before it taps you on the shoulder and asks one simple question: was this really yours? For most of my life, I never asked that question. I did what was expected. I followed the script that was handed to me so early that I didn't even remember agreeing to it. School, work, relationships, responsibilities. Each step made sense on its own. Each choice felt reasonable, even mature. People praised me for being stable, reliable, sensible. They said I was doing everything right. And I believed them. I believed them when I took the job I didn't want because it was secure. I believed them when I stayed in a relationship that felt empty because it was normal. I believed them when I told myself that passion was childish, that dreams were for people who hadn't grown up yet. I told myself that happiness was overrated, that peace meant endurance. I became very good at endurance. Every morning, I woke up at the same time. Same alarm, same routine, same neutral expression in the mirror. I didn't hate my life. That's the part that makes this harder to explain. I didn't suffer in a way that demanded escape. My life was acceptable. Comfortable enough to keep me trapped. Pain would have been easier. Pain would have justified change. Instead, I lived in a constant state of emotional numbness. Not sad. Not happy. Just present enough to function. I smiled at the right moments. I laughed when others laughed. I nodded when they spoke about plans, promotions, futures. Inside, I felt like a guest in my own existence. There were moments, of course. Moments when something inside me tried to speak. Late at night, when the noise stopped. When I'd hear a song that reminded me of a version of myself I barely remembered. When I'd catch my reflection somewhere unexpected and feel a strange grief, like mourning someone who was still alive. Those moments scared me. So I learned how to silence them. I told myself everyone feels this way. I told myself adulthood is about sacrifice. I told myself that wanting more was selfish. I repeated those thoughts until they became facts. And slowly, without noticing, I stopped asking questions altogether. Years passed like that. Quietly. Efficiently. I built a life that looked complete from the outside. A life people admired. A life my parents could be proud of. A life that never once asked me who I really was. The breaking point didn't come during a tragedy. It came during something absurdly small. I was sitting alone in my car, parked outside a grocery store, holding a bag of things I didn't really need. I remember staring at the steering wheel, waiting for the motivation to go home. And suddenly, out of nowhere, a thought crossed my mind so clearly that it felt spoken aloud. If this is your life forever, would you be okay with that? My first instinct was panic. My second was denial. But the question didn't leave. It stayed with me the entire drive home. It followed me into the apartment. It sat with me while I ate dinner in silence. It waited while I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I realized then that I had never consciously chosen my life. I had only chosen not to disappoint anyone. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was anxious, but because something inside me finally woke up. Memories surfaced. Old desires. Versions of myself I had buried under responsibility and fear. I remembered what I wanted before I learned what was reasonable. I remembered the things that made me feel alive before I learned to prioritize approval. And with those memories came an unbearable truth. I had traded my entire life for acceptance. The next weeks were brutal. Not outwardly. Inwardly. I went through my days pretending everything was the same, while internally dismantling everything I believed about myself. I saw my choices clearly for the first time, and I hated how logical they all were. How justified. How safe. Safety had cost me everything. I tried to talk myself out of it. I listed reasons to stay. Stability. Reputation. Time already invested. I told myself it was too late. That starting over was irresponsible. That people my age don't reinvent themselves. But another voice had grown louder. A quieter voice, but persistent. It asked better questions. Who are you when no one is watching? Who would you be if no one expected anything from you? How much longer are you willing to disappear quietly? I didn't have answers. Only fear. The hardest part wasn't imagining change. It was imagining the disappointment. The confusion. The judgment. I knew people wouldn't understand. I had spent years convincing them I was content. How could I now explain that I had been absent the entire time? So I didn't explain. I made a decision that still feels unreal when I think about it. I didn't announce it. I didn't seek validation. I simply began to detach. Slowly. Carefully. I reduced my life to essentials. I let go of roles that weren't mine. I stopped performing. And then one morning, with a suitcase that felt too light for a lifetime, I left. No dramatic goodbye. No grand speech. Just absence. Starting over isn't romantic. It's lonely. It's humiliating. You become invisible again, but this time without excuses. There were days I questioned everything. Days I missed the certainty of my old life, even knowing it was killing me slowly. Days I wondered if regret would now follow me in a different form. But something else happened too. I began to feel. Not constantly. Not perfectly. But honestly. Fear felt real. Joy felt sharp. Sadness felt clean instead of dull. I was no longer numb. I was alive in a way that didn't require permission. I learned who I was when no one applauded. I learned how much of my identity had been built for survival, not truth. I learned that choosing yourself feels selfish only to people who benefited from your silence. Do I regret leaving so late every day? Do I regret leaving at all? Not once. If you're listening to this and feeling that quiet ache, that sense of living a life that fits but doesn't belong, hear this clearly. You don't need a disaster to justify change. You don't need permission to start over. And it's never too late to choose a life that actually feels like yours. Regret doesn't scream. It whispers. And if you listen closely enough, it might just save you.